And now it's time for A Wealth of Wisdom.
Michael Poynton on stage at the Paris studio in London's West End, introducing the man who's made the world laugh for 40 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Norman Wisdom. Welcome back, Norman, to continue your life story. When we left you last week, you were 14 and working as a page boy in a London club. Then you got a suggestion from one of your mates.
One of the other page boys is a little Welsh fellow, you know, and he said to me one day, he said, you know, I'm fed up with this, aren't you? I said, well, I'm not terribly keen on it. He said, how would you fancy being a miner, you see? So I said, well, I'm a miner. He said, no, I mean working down the mine. So anyway, I said, you're right. Anyway, we packed up and we walked together, and believe me, we walked every inch of the way in those days, no hitchhiking. We walked to Cardiff. We'd been down to the kitchen and we took a boot box full of grub from the kitchen, filled the old cardboard boot box, and off we went. It took us about 10 days. And when we got to Cardiff, I was going to stay, live with him at his place, you see, with his parents. But when we got to Cardiff, he changed his mind. And he was bigger than me. And he took the boot box with what was left of the grub as well. And he said, I'm sorry now, but I'm going, you see. And he said, you can please yourself, what do you do? So I went down to the shipping yard, you see. We're in Cardiff. I went down, I thought, well, I'll try and get a job. And I went down to the shipping yard. Now, I should have gone to the docks to get a job, but this was a depressed period. I'm talking about 1931. See, I'm 32 that time. I mustn't go back too far. And, actually, if I'd gone to the docks, I wouldn't have got a job. But because I went to the shipping yard, and there was a load of fellows, you know, workers all round the...
a brazier.
Brazier, that's it. They were sitting around the brazier. Thank you very much, Michael.
Pleasure.
Sitting around the brazier with the fire going, having their sandwiches at lunchtime, you see. And I went in there. One of them got up and said, what are you doing here? You see? So I said, well, what do you mean? I just walked from London. He said, I don't believe this, you see. And he said, show me the bottom of your shoes. So, did you like this accent? So I showed him the bottom, and honestly, there were holes in the bottom of his shoes. Oh, dear. No. And they believed me, of course, which was true. And then, before you know what happened, they gave him his sandwiches and tea and that sort of thing. And then the foreman went over to a ship which was being repaired, and it was going out 2 days later. Am I lucky? Because the foreman, it was called the Main Court. And the foreman came back and he said, I've got your job as a cabin boy on there. And I went back with somebody. One of the workmen took me back to his wife and family that night, and I stayed with them just for the 2 nights, and then we back onto the Main Court about, the 2 or 3 days later. And before you know what happened, I was on the way to the Argentine, and I was 14 years of age.
Is that the trip where you learned to box, Norman, on that voyage?
The crew were, they all did exercise, and they were doing boxing. And eventually they said, well, do you want to ever go, you see? And I said, no, fear, not me. So they said, no, we won't hurt you. So eventually I agreed, and they put the boxing gloves on, and I started sparring, and they taught me how to do this. And when we got to Buenos Aires, I knew why they taught me, because they took me to a boxing booth. Remember, there's an old-fashioned boxing booth where if you go in and there's professional fighters, and if you stand up for 1 round, you get, say, £1. You stand up for 2 rounds, you get £2. But if you're up for 3 rounds, which is the maximum you can go 3 rounds, then you get even £5, and it was marvellous. So, and they put me into this ring, and I knew why. They took me and put me in against a bloke who was, I was so small then, and the bloke I fought must have been about a foot taller and about 2 stone heavier, but I stood up. I didn't stand up. I mean, he smashed me to the ground many times. But I was still conscious at the end of the 3 rounds. I was determined to come. I mean, I was smothered with blood and snot and all that. But it's true. I can't help it. And then the thing was that when it came to I'd finished the fight, and I was there for 3 hours, and I went to collect the money, and the crew had collected it and gone and left it. I didn't mind, really, because, you know, and at that time, this is really true, there was sort of riots going on in Buenos Aires, I don't know what about, but I went to have to find my way back to the main decor of the ship on my own, and there was blokes shucking stones and lumps of coal at me, and I'm running, and I got on board the ship, and there was a Greek sailor who was, when I got on board, he was chasing me all over the place. Because I was quite attractive then. And I was very lucky. I was very lucky because the steward had stayed on board, and he saw this Greek sailor chasing me round and round, and as he came round the corner, he hit him with a shovel in the face. Yes, I remember the bloke didn't eat for a fortnight. And there's another thing that happened, I never forget this. It was rough one day. I think this was coming back through the Bay of Biscay on the way back, and it was rough, and they had a lifeline from the galley to the officers' quarters where I had to serve, and I came out there with a soup tureen, and I didn't trouble... I put my hand over the line, because the seas were coming over big, and you have to dodge in between them. I put my head over the line with the soup tureen, and I ran, and it was ran. And the sea came over, and all in the soup, the sea went. And I found myself lying in the scuppers, you know, that's in the corner by the railings, and I still had the soup tureen upright. The sea had gone in it, but it was upright. And I got up, dodged the next one, big wave, and I rushed into the officers' mess, and I remember then I served the soup and stood in the little galley, you know, by the officers' mess, and I heard one of the officers say to the other, he said, I wouldn't put any salt until you've tasted it.
That all sounds wonderful material for comedy films to me in later years.
I wish they'd do comedy films again, I tell you. I wish they would.
But tell me, Norman, you went back to Britain and it was a bit Dickensian, your life then. I mean, it was really a hard time when you got home, wasn't it?
I went to an agency where they did, you know, various staff, domestic staff, and I was sent to Taunton then as a kitchen boy. And I remember I hadn't eaten for a couple of days when I got there, true. They showed me where the kitchen was, and they left me, and I went into the larder, and there was a chicken, and and the butler came in and gave me the bloody sack again.
Is that what made you think about joining the army? How did that come about, Norman, after all those
Well, I was back to London, and now I got back to London again. They gave me my fare back. I kept that, but the money soon went, and I was sleeping rough on doorsteps, really true, and back of buildings and things. Behind the Marshall Fox statue in Grosvenor Square, just, you know, in front of Victoria Station. And then I used to go on the Euro to a coffee stall keeper at about 3:30 in the morning, and I just used to look over. And I used to look at him, and he used to push a cup of bubble and a hot pie to me. And I know it's and I used to love it. And then as I'm doing it one night, he said, "Why don't you join the army?" I said, "Join the army at my size?" He said, "Well, you can join as a boy." I said, "Well, I'm only 14. He said, "That's right. You can join as a boy when you're 14. And you could those days. Really true. Yes. So I went to Scotland Yard, which was the recruiting centre in those days, and the guard, well, this was late at night, of course, and the guard, he couldn't give me help, but I did get a kip in the guard room that night. It was smashing. And the following day, I had a medical examination, and I passed it. But he said, you've got to be on the waiting list. It could be a couple of months before you get called up. And I got a job at the Marble Arch Pavilion, which is now the Odeon. And I got a job there as a page boy. And then I went into the lift one day, and there was a film premiere with Crawford.
Joan Crawford?
Yeah, Joan Crawford in this film premiere. And she came in at the appropriate time with all the crowd, and I drove the lift that she got into to go up into the room where she'd wait before she saw the film. And I drove the lift up, and she ruffled my hair and gave me a little cuddle. And I never forgot it. And then years later, I was in Hollywood at a very important bologna lunch, which I call them. I mean, you still eat, but it's all a load of bologna. But and I sat next to Joan Crawford, and I told her about it. And, you know, honestly, she remembered, and she held my hand under the table during lunch. Yeah. that was marvellous.
Well, Norman, we're going to finish this show with a song. Is there something suitable to end this particular show with? What do you think?
The first song that I ever sang on the stage, and it was my mother's idea, and it was her favourite song. It's got such beautiful melody and such lovely lyrics, and it's called They Didn't Believe Me.
And when I told them how wonderful you are, they didn't believe me. They didn't believe me. Your lips, your eyes, your curly hair are in a class beyond compare. You're the loveliest thing I've ever seen. And when I tell them, for I'm certainly going to tell them that I'm the man whose wife someday you'll be. They'll never believe me. They'll never believe me that from this great big world you've chosen me. And when I tell them, for I'm certainly going to tell them that I'm the man whose wife someday you'll be. They'll never believe me. They'll never believe me that from this great big world you've chosen
Norman Wisdom has been dispensing a wealth of wisdom in conversation with Michael Poynton, who also researched the programme. A Wealth of Wisdom is produced by Edward Taylor.